the last kind of topic, issue, aspect of this I wanted to hit is violence. In this shortened version, I've tried to make it as safe as possible, so I don't think there's anything um, you know, potentially very upset. I mean, it's upsetting material, but I think it's pretty safe to deal with. I don't There's no graphic images or anything like that. So I think everybody should be okay. But you can skip this part, if you need to. Um, but so I want to maybe I'll introduce you to this bit of text here. Is a quote from Jackson Katz, who is an educator, an activist, a PhD, pretty well known guy in these circles. So you can pause here and read it real quick. Okay, same here. You can kind of get the gist of this. I don't think I really need to explain a whole lot. So maybe pause and read. Okay. And this, just a little bit more kind of background facts and things like that. So just here, just to kind of make the point that when there's that violence is also uh, particularly egregious when there's other kinds of inequalities, power inequalities, and things like that that are in in play here. And then just sort of like I think this question of violence is also really in power are really important. Again, if you go back to that like kind of normalizing stuff and culture and the way things are changing, the idea that now women are accessing life in the public sphere in the past few decades like much more, and a lot of people, like men in particular, and hashtag not all men and all that kind of stuff to keep in mind, of course. But there are those who've kind of felt they're that certain things that used to be promised to them are no longer promised to them, and it feels to them like they have to give something up. And the theory is, for some people, here's Jackson Katz again. He in the other documentary, this is from The Mask You Live In, made by the same people that did Misrepresentation. Um, but in the other documentary, he mentions how women, about according to him, his sort of way of putting it is that with women taking up more and more space in professional settings, in public life, and all of this kind of stuff, that the reaction in media and things like that has to been to make them take up less space. I think it would be interesting to hear what you guys kind of think about that, and representation in the media and stuff like that, because I feel like with things like Netflix and a lot of these other platforms, I feel like there's been a lot more space for diverse kinds of stories and storytelling, and different new producers and TV show makers and film directors, telling different kinds of stories. But like maybe I feel like even in the past 5 years, there's been a lot of changes. And Misrepresentation was made in 2009, like way before like Netflix was even a thing. So might be interesting to think about how those things have changed maybe. But if you have, if 94% or some high percentage of mass homicides, I think that's defined as like more than four people being killed, are committed by men. What does that mean exactly? Why is that? Like, how that is something that our culture is producing, obviously. So why? What is causing that? Um, So again, this idea that if something doesn't, or somebody doesn't fit into the norms of society, or violates norms, then you have to be there are sort of social mechanisms for disciplining people who don't like kind of fit. I think everybody kind of knows that on some kind of intuitive level or something like that. You've had experience on one side or the other, like I'm sure that I have been on both sides of either not fitting in and people sort of bullying or pressuring me to act a certain way, and I will go along with it, or I'll be on the other side and I'll be the one sort of pressuring people to fit and be how they're supposed to be and stuff like that. So I think that's a pretty common experience, but it's just sort of something you don't often think of it in those terms, I don't think. Um, I mean, I guess to take the colonialism example, you dehumanize the people that you're trying to colonize, and so that justifies their colonization. Putting them in jail if they don't behave themselves. All of these kinds of things. So this justifies all different kinds of violence against the quote unquote other. And I know that you guys know that there's tons of examples of that. And so my interpretation of intersectional feminism, radical, if you want to go I mean, maybe it's not radical. Maybe this is not quite radical enough for those that would consider themselves radical. But how I interpret it is that instead of advocating for equality within an existing like unjust system, I think radical intersectional feminism advocates, completely transforming that system. I don't know if it would have to be starting from scratch or whatever, but it would have to be like completely redone, kind of idea. So that's just kind of my interpretation of it, just from the lots and lots of reading that I've done. So when and like here's all this other stuff that I just did not even had time to talk about. Not even in the long version of the PowerPoint did I get to most of this. So these are just some other resources. You got Netflix, documentaries, TED Talks, YouTube, some good Comedy Central, Drunk History episodes if you have access to that. I think you can find at least some of the really good clips of these on YouTube. Some books. Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex. I didn't even have that part in here. Famously said, one is not born, one becomes a woman. One is not born a woman, she becomes a woman. And then I think Margaret Cho does kind of a really nice job of taking a lot of this stuff and tying it all together in this little rant that she does about self-esteem. Buster, you want to say bye? Want to say goodbye? Say bye, students. He doesn't care.